I've made a number of investments after getting involved with psilocybin. And one of my first investments is a company called MACHUGH. Back in 2018 or 19, I had been talking to this kid on Facebook. His name's Felix Bly. Didn't know his name until he graduated. I talked to him for 2 years. This kid was way far ahead of the game in terms of psilocybin technology. I went back to visit him. Within 2 days, he actually developed the first test kit for psilocybin off of raw mushrooms. It was amazing. 2 years ago, they actually introduced the test kit. And I think on the pictures here, I've, like the first one with the vials, that was the very first one he showed me, like 2 days. Prior to, there was a next generation, and then the final generation right now is with these little vials, which is really great. Top picture up there is actually raw psilocybin extracted from mushrooms, which that's pretty rare. The one with the cute little color bottles there, that's different MAOI inhibitors extracted from mushrooms. So there's a lot of different compounds. This kid's a rock star. I am also heavily involved in a company called Recovery Nexus. These guys, they do halfway house for people who are in recovery. And the guy on the far right is a guy named Todd. Todd's the head of it. Another board member there is Nathan Sackett. Nathan is the head of alternative medicine or novel therapeutics at the University of Washington. The couple of pictures of the plants there are kind of interesting because the one in the little cups, that's iboga. And the third picture there is, I think it's actually the very first fruited iboga in the United States in a warehouse in Oakland. And that happened like a few months ago. So the tech is progressing. So under MUSH-LOVE, I've created a bunch of different products, had a lot of different consultants that I've worked with. Up at the top left, there's a box that we have developed for growing mushrooms, which we were going to release that a lot earlier, but because of COVID, the parts, the electronic components are hard to get. But as you can see, we've got gummy bears, gummy unicorns, the more sparkles, the better. We've got a nice lab, and it turns out that making gummy bears is actually really hard to make a good one, especially to make them taste good. And so we have basically evolved the extract down to, we can put it in pills. We've got the red and the blue pill. The blue pill, of course, is for keeping you in the matrix, and the red pill is further down the rabbit hole. For anybody that's interested in that, we have so many tools now to look at extending and shortening the duration for making it so that the dosing technology, we're spending a huge amount of time in dosing technology. Okay. My time's up here, but yeah, I've got some different farming assets here to show. I'll cut it off. Okay.
Thank you, Will. We definitely want to hear from you some more. Thanks for staying up here with us, Will. We're going to get to some questions and answers right after the next speaker. Our next speaker is Benjamin LIGHTBURN. Benjamin is a proven entrepreneur and leader specializing in the research, development, and commercialization of novel extraction technologies. He is currently applying this experience to the development of natural psychedelic medicines as CEO and co-founder of Filament Health. Welcome, Ben.
Yeah, so my name is Ben LIGHTBURN. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Filament Health. We're actually from Canada, this strange land to the north. I was asked to share a bit today about our perspectives on potentially operating, or I would say more like participating in the upcoming Oregon market. And so I'm very pleased to be here today. Quick background on who we are, who I am. As mentioned, I've actually spent my whole career in the commercialization of novel botanical extraction technology. I know it's a very, very narrow niche, or niche as we say up north. And Filament was created to bring that experience of myself, as well as some former colleagues, into the psychedelics market, because as we saw it a few years ago, it was very strange to us that basically all interest and resources and attention were going into synthetically derived psychedelics rather than naturally derived psychedelics, especially in the pharmaceutical market. So we decided to start a company. We developed a number of different processes to eventually create the very first natural psychedelic drug candidates, and proud now to have the actual first natural drug candidates in the first FDA-approved natural clinical trial. So that's something we're very proud of. The other thing that we're very proud of now in Canada is we have this program called the Special Access Program, and that actually has allowed us to distribute our psilocybin drug candidates to patients who are in need through their doctors. So it's given us a real insight into just the really, really dire need for these kinds of solutions. We see patients who are quite literally on death's door making requests for psilocybin. Just today, in fact, we got another 15 such requests approved by the Canadian government. So we have a lot of real-world experience actually distributing what you could say is medical-grade psilocybin. Why Oregon? Why are we interested in Oregon? Well, it's closer than Jamaica. It's way easier to get to. It's very interesting for us to help prove out the first North American non-medical market. Obviously, right now, the vast majority of attention is in sort of pharmaceutical development. So we're very interested to see and help out where we can in a market that's focused on another alternative to sort of medical distribution. We'd really like to test our hypothesis that natural products obviously can be the preferred route in markets like Oregon, alongside markets that are pharmaceutical in nature. So obviously we're big proponents of natural products, and so we're very excited obviously by a natural-only market in Oregon. Obviously, we as a Canadian company and as Canadians, we can't actually be the ones applying for licenses and actually manufacturing, nor can we export into Oregon. So what that means is we're busy running around the state, finding local manufacturing partners to work with. And we actually view this as a plus, because we don't really want to go through the whole rigmarole of building another facility. We already have one in Canada. It's difficult enough. And we get to meet lots of really friendly Oregonians who have already been through, oftentimes, the whole cannabis procedure, and they have bank accounts and insurance and all that kind of stuff. So it's actually good for us, we think, to be able to work with other partners. How does the market, the emerging market in Oregon, fit into some of our larger operations? It will allow us to collect a certain amount of anecdotal data, but interestingly, we can't use any of that data for any regulatory filings, drug development purposes, because it will all be conducted outside of the clinical trial environment, and of course it will also be federally illegal, so you can't really take that data to the FDA and say, you know, let me use this to get a drug approved. It will allow us to test our hypothesis that people will prefer natural products, but even more than that, we think that eventually they will come to prefer standardized products that have a specific dose of psilocybin or other psychedelics actually written right on the package. We think that's an important factor. And obviously Oregon, all eyes are on Oregon State, right? So we think it will serve as a blueprint for the rollout in other states, or maybe in Canada or other jurisdictions. Feedback to date from investors and the community has been really, I would say, mixed. Traditional biotech investors who we interact with a lot, and most of the, I guess you could say, the sort of psychedelics industry, in my experience, is actually very cool to Oregon and what's going on in Oregon, right? It's like we view psychedelics as biotech only. We're pharmaceutical companies. We're pharmaceutical investors. And obviously, as a naturally focused company, yes, we're excited about our natural extracts as drugs, but we're probably really more excited about naturals in any kind of non-medical market. So it really depends on which investor you're talking to. Luckily, investors that are interested in Filament are probably also interested in non-medical markets and obviously natural markets. local partners we've talked to, manufacturing companies, people on the ground, are all obviously very enthusiastic about the prospect of having technology provided by us that can afford them the opportunity to manufacture standardized natural psychedelics. So that's it, and looking forward to the panel.
So, we heard earlier today from Angela Elby at the Oregon Health Authority, and she mentioned that the draft rules, as they're now written, limit manufacturing to one species. And then I know from the draft rules, there's also some limitations on the amount or how much of a product manufacturers can have, and, as well as dosage limitations. Based on those things and what you've seen, what are the economics of a manufacturer, especially for someone who's thinking about getting into this business?
I started off as a farmer with a personal mission and an offer to donate all of the product for the entire state. I decided not to do that, it's still on the table for me. But after a meeting with Tom Eckhart, with a few people who were interested in growing, I came across a really enthusiastic group of people who not only were producing product, but were enthusiastic about helping people. And what I decided, what's in my mind right now, is I sit there and look at the economics of it and say, how do we take and elevate all of the growers in the state in such a way that they can succeed? I don't know that they can make it by growing cubensis mushrooms by themselves. I think that they probably have to build a little bit nicer, maybe grow other mushrooms or have some other income. But then you end up with a bunch of gardeners feeding a ketchup factory, and you have to decide, is that a good idea? I look to the example of David Bronner, who has taken hundreds of farmers in third world nations and produced products that many of us enjoy. And I look at that as a successful example, and my efforts are going towards that kind of endeavor.
I think the single species rule is probably one that makes sense, at least for now. In the spirit of caution, we know way more about Psilocybe cubensis than any other species of psilocybin-containing mushroom. There are reports of, obviously, like woodlover paralysis associated with other species. So yeah, I think starting, at least for now, just with cubensis makes sense. The economics, that's a fascinating question. As we heard this morning, we don't really know how much clients will be charged, how much will it cost to operate these facilities, what percentage of the revenue will go to the products, will they be free? We don't know. So there's just so many things that are still unknown. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, sure. Well, Will, that's fascinating. I didn't know that you were considering, donating, almost the entire supply to the state of Oregon. Is that part of the vision for your company to be, more of a philanthropic company, or, what is the purpose behind your vision in your company?
My vision is to see as many of my friends like Scott visit as many of the people in this room as they possibly can and be around next year. And so whatever that takes to make that happen is where I'm at. If there's a way that we can enable the smaller growers to be successful and share some of our capital assets and help them make that happen, I feel like each one of those people that are growing or participating in the market, they've been doing it already. They're gonna continue to do it because they want to help. If it takes a larger grower to come in and make that happen, I think we're talking, if you wanted to produce 1 million doses, we're really probably talking a couple thousand pounds. And for a commercial farmer, that's even a small operation of a commercial mushroom farmer, that's a month's production. That's a small ask. And so it's really not one of, do we want to be philanthropic? I mean, I want to see all of the people in this room be successful and helping as many people as they can, and whatever it takes to make that happen is where our efforts will go.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I have another question from the audience. What significance have you found that secondary metabolites play in shifting the experience of psilocybin?
That's a fascinating question. Obviously, one we get a lot, and really, in our view, is the whole point of making a natural product, because in so doing, you get to include all of the secondary metabolites, right? So magic mushroom extracts, or magic mushrooms themselves, contain much more than just psilocybin. You have psilocin, baeocystin, norbaeocystin, any number of compounds which may synergistically potentiate or have other kinds of effects. Up until now, there actually hasn't been any human clinical research to show any differences between a isolated natural or a isolated synthetic psilocybin and a product that contains all of these other secondary metabolites. But there is some animal studies that show evidence, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, right? People report that different mushrooms have different effects, right? Like this one, penis envy, makes you yawn, or this other one, blue meanie, makes you talkative, or whatever it is. It's important to take any sort of self-reporting of psychedelic experiences with a very large sort of anecdotal grain of salt. But I think there seems to be enough of that reporting that these different mushrooms have different effects. And if that's true, it's probably due to some of the metabolites in the mushroom itself. So it's one of the things that, with more research, we hope to be able to establish with much more scientific fact.
Thank you. Well, we saw some bright pictures of those perfect-looking gummy bears, Will. What other kinds of products do you both intend to put into the marketplace? And we know that, at least under the draft rules as they stand now in Oregon, microdosing is allowed. Do you anticipate supporting that effort by offering microdose products?
I think that looking at microdose versus journey level dose is a really oversimplification of just the sheer quantity of the product. The form factor is a big part of the experience. My business partner, who had no interest in ever touching a mushroom ever, couldn't get enough of them as soon as I put them into a pill. And so part of a product that requires set and setting mindset in what they're taking is they have to believe whatever package you've delivered that in is medicinal or supports what they are intending. And so I think what we can do as a market enabler is we have taken the psilocybin and put it into different packaging. For example, we've used a fluidized bed system to granulate it so that it can be encapsulated and put into other products much more easily. So if a person decides that that needs to be in a beverage or an Alka-Seltzer or a gummy bear or a honey thing or whatever, our job as technology enablers is to simplify that packaging technique and to quantify it.
Yeah, for now, we're making just drug candidates, so they look just like any other drug. They're in a little capsule. But as Will said, yeah, we believe in all different form factors, especially ones that can enable a standardized dose of natural psychedelics. So there's no reason why they couldn't be put into a unicorn gummy or a beverage or whatever it is.
Great. Well, our time is up, but thank you both so much for your time today and your feedback. We appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to our next category of training programs. Our first speaker today is Elizabeth NIELSON. Elizabeth is a co-founder of Fluence and a psychologist with a focus on developing psychedelic medicines as empirically supported treatments for PTSD, substance use problems, and mood disorders. Dr. NIELSON is a site co-principal investigator and therapist for an FDA-approved Phase 3 clinical trial of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, and has served as a therapist on FDA-approved clinical trials of psilocybin psilocybin-assisted treatment of alcohol use disorder, psilocybin-assisted treatment of treatment-resistant depression, and earlier phase 2 and 3 trials of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. Through Fluence, she provides continuing education and training programs for therapists who wish to engage in integration of psychedelic experiences in clinical settings. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hello. Nice to see everyone, and thank you so much for being present here today. It means quite a lot to be part of this program, and again, an additional by way of introduction, I'm, in addition to the earlier introduction, a co-founder of Fluence, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Fluence is, what our mission is, and how plans for a program to train facilitators here in Oregon are evolving and hopefully will continue to evolve as approvals move forward. So my role at Fluence is as a co-founder, and my title is Chief Visionary Officer. That means I have a lot of ideas. And we work very hard with a very small team to put a lot of those things into action. I wanted to start a little bit with our mission today. Fluence was founded in 2019 after several years of informally working together with Ingmar Gorman, who's also a psychologist and psychedelic assisted therapy researcher. And the two of us basically came up with, we wanted to create an organization that could increase awareness, availability, and safety of psychedelic therapies and related healthcare. And in order to do that, we turn to education. So education is really the means by which we've chosen to pursue that. We started teaching together in 2018, and then essentially evolved this company just out of our direct experience training people. So everything that we had for those first few years came through simply creating trainings and providing them, and then reinvesting in the process and bringing in more help along the way. There's several ways in which we train and support clinicians in the field currently. We have a variety of continuing education programs for licensed clinicians. We have a variety of open programs for people who may or may not be licensed and are just interested in the field. We do a lot of training for research studies, so groups of people that are going to be working in research, providing psilocybin therapy and providing MDMA or other kinds of assisted therapies in research settings where they're going to have that access right now. We do a lot of mentoring, training, practicum, retreats, and things like that for people to really have a well-rounded and experience-based training experience as they move towards being able to practice. Our focus really is on helping clinicians be able to be trained in things that they can use within their scope of practice. So within an existing license or on a research study where their psychedelic therapy is going to be authorized. And I think that's partly why the opportunity to work with training facilitators in Oregon is so of interest to us, because it does really align with that principle. And you can see here I've just posted logos from a number of partners that we have in the field, people that we work with, and companies for which we run specific training programs. We also have a focus on diversity and a diversity scholarship fund, so we take requests from people for any of our programs that would not otherwise be able to participate and evaluate and provide quite a lot of spots in programs for people so that there's access to programming across the board. When we talk about a facilitator training program, we're developing a program that is specifically for psychotherapists and people who have a background in mental health care. It's our belief that people who have training in psychotherapy often have just a lot to offer in terms of their existing capacities to be with people who are struggling, and that those who are struggling with their mental health and struggling with addiction may be better served, or at least well served, by someone who's got some experience with the kinds of things that they're seeing on a daily basis. So we do believe that psychotherapists and those with that training have a lot to offer here, and our program will really focus on meeting the unique needs of that population. As we've heard, there are going to be some specific things that people who also maybe have a psychotherapist license will need to consider. So we'll kind of be working with that population as also a population that we have experience working with in many of our other programs. So we draw on quite a lot of experience here, but I'll give you our program overview. We'll have a blend of asynchronous and live online programs. We'll be supported by our learning management system, asynchronous practice session programs, and our own video resources. And like all Fluence programs, we tend to focus on having small class sizes where people can really have an interactive experience, get to know their trainers really well, get to know their classmates really well, develop relationships, and have a very engaged learning experience. So it tends to be not so much passive reading and just watching videos, but really engaged experiential learning activities. I want to just show you really quickly some of our team and resources. We actually do a training program for our trainers, so we help people get habilitated in and used to the training techniques and training methodology that we use. This is a group that came together, 12 people. This is actually just a couple of months ago, and we came together for 3 days to focus on training in the contemplative practice methodologies that we use throughout our courses at Fluence, as well as experiential activities and group teaching experiences and things like that. This is a snapshot from our learning management system, which supports everything that we do. We have class enrollment and everything sort of organized in one portal. It's quite a project to build, but very much streamlines what we do. And then this is actually not my living room. It's our studio, which we put together over the course of the last year. We have a professional film studio set up so we can actually produce content. We can do demonstration videos. We can host live streams, webinars, interviews, all that sort of stuff. It's a great resource. What you can't see in this picture is all the film equipment that's sort of facing the couch there. But do expect to see this scene in upcoming training presentations, training videos, and live stream events. I made it in under 7 minutes. Thank you so much, and look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next speaker in this panel is Rebecca Martinez. Rebecca is a queer Chicana, writer and community organizer living on Chinook homelands known as Portland, Oregon. She is the founder and executive director of ALMA Institute, a nonprofit psilocybin facilitator training program fiscally sponsored by MAPS. Prior to her work at ALMA, Rebecca was co-founder of Fruiting Bodies Collective and a staff member on the Measure 109 campaign. She serves on the Oregon Health Authority's Equity Subcommittee, advising the state's rollout of the Psilocybin Services Act. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hello. Wonderful to see some familiar faces today. It's so good to be here with you all. I am going to use note cards because this presentation does not want to be under 7 minutes, but it's going to be close. So if it feels like I'm rushing, just bear with me. I'm going to start with briefly my story. I was born about 2 miles from here and grew up in the area. My family has roots in northern Mexico, in Spain, and in Portugal, but I really consider Oregon my home. Being here is a bit of a surprise. I actually have a degree in spiritual leadership from a Bible college, which I attended in 2010. And I subsequently had experience working in communications, in community organizing, and in food justice. So it's a pleasure to be here now, having traversed so many unexpected paths to be here. I do want to share something personal with you all before we talk about ALMA. When I was a young adult, I lived through a pretty nightmarish year in which several really tough things happened. I had a family member who was diagnosed with brain cancer. My brother was incarcerated, and my father was shot 3 times by police during a mental health crisis. He did survive, but he never fully recovered, and that was a really important piece of why I'm here today. All of this happened while I was pregnant with my son, who is now 9 years old. Zooming forward a bit, several years later, I had my first ceremonial experience with psilocybin mushrooms. I do want to pause here to express deep, deep gratitude to the mushrooms themselves, or Los Niños Santos. They're not just a substance, are they? They're a living, intelligent entity, and they require and deserve our acknowledgement here today. Along those same lines, it's also very important that we acknowledge the original stewards of this centuries-old healing tradition, and we need to remember it's been preserved in the face of erasure and colonization and overcome so much to our great benefit here today. With this awareness, Alma Institute is a part of a reciprocity project in collaboration with the Fungi Foundation to support the cultural preservation of the Mazatec community and Maria Sabina's archive. Thank you. So please find myself or another Alma team member throughout the weekend if you'd like to hear more about that. It's a really exciting project. Coming back to my story, working with psilocybin was transformative for me. It catalyzed a healing process in which I was able to come to terms with my upbringing, with a history of spiritual abuse in the church, and the trauma and the massive untended grief of police violence against my family. Reflecting on what I wanted to share with you about that transformation, I think the best way I could put it is that there was pain that had become a part of my personality, and I don't know if anyone here can relate, and I see some heads nodding. Working with the mushrooms began to help lift that and find a way through so that the person standing here today had enough space to come forward. Which brings us to Alma. I founded Alma Institute after several years being involved with several psychedelic advocacy projects. It became clear to me that it was time to transition from the envisioning phase into the building phase. And I recognized that in order to create an equitable and diverse field that we talk so much about at events like these, we would need not only strong infrastructure, but heart-led leaders at the forefront. In other words, I set out to merge the mystical with the logistical. Alma Institute's mission is to strengthen and diversify the psychedelic field, and we do this by offering prioritized enrollment to systematically oppressed and excluded communities. More specifically, we're seeking to bring more facilitators of color, queer, gender diverse, and low-income facilitators into the field. As an extension, we're seeking to enroll students who plan to serve diverse populations. What's been really exciting is that our current wait list has such a wide range of people and such a wide range of communities that they want to serve expressed. Among those are group ceremonial work, end-of-life care, trauma recovery, substance use disharmony, eating disorders, and healing from the specific traumas associated with war, immigration, and racial violence. This mission to diversify the field sits within a larger vision of a world in which intentional use of entheogens is widely and safely available to all people and relevant to their ancestral and lived experiences. In other words, our dream is to help catalyze a shift from individual to collective healing so that these medicines can expand in their potential so we can be healing forward and backward in time and across geographies, across lived experience, and across unique reasons for participation. Love that. To further this mission, we're also opening a sliding scale service center here in the city of Portland. This will provide not only a practicum site for our students and hopefully other students in the area, but also an accessible place for the community to come experience psilocybin for themselves and an opportunity for paid apprenticeships so that we can ease the transition from students to graduates to lead facilitators and really help to minimize and prevent harm and risk and also to maximize positive outcomes for the clients that we serve. Just briefly, a bit about our structure before I wrap up. As mentioned, we are a nonprofit training program fiscally sponsored by MAPS. We have a 501c3 application pending. MAPS has been instrumental in us getting here. So for now, we've been donor funded by about 24 individuals who we consider founding supporters, as well as several organizations such as Dr. Bronner's and the Educational Foundation of America. those founding partners have come alongside us in a larger way, and we continue to build relationships. So come find us if that's something you're interested in. The service site itself will be a separate legal entity so that we can actually handle psilocybin mushrooms. We want to keep the IRS happy there. And the core of our work, really, it's time for me to wrap up, is to center in the context of our body, to center in the context of the earth beneath us, which is something that unifies all of us, and to center in our individual and collective histories, because we believe that in order to have a clear conversation about healing, we need to define what that means. And in order to understand what we're healing, we need to understand where we've been and what we've lived through. So with that, I just wanted to share briefly that our real dream at ALMA is that the entheogenic allies that we're surrounded by can be helpful to us not only in healing our minds and our bodies, but also our alma, which means soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you for sharing your personal story. I know sometimes that isn't easy in front of a big crowd, so we really appreciate you opening up. Let's see, before I get to some audience questions, Elizabeth, I wanted to just give you a chance to speak a little bit more about maybe, specifically what Fluence plans to do here in Oregon, and also just curious about what some of your investors or funders thought of coming into the Oregon space.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll just say that our plan for Oregon is to engage in creating a facilitator training program, and at this point, that's it. So we're not looking to also open a service center or also become a grower, a manufacturer. Our focus has been from day one on training and education, and we've really tried to specialize in that area, and so that's really the primary focus and the only focus right now. I have to say that we've had a wonderful amount of support. We have a handful of investors that came in actually only earlier this year, and really those are people that are driven by the mission and the idea of what we do. They were extremely supportive of our backgrounds, mine and Ingmar's, as co-founders of the company, and the work that we had already done in terms of our harm reduction approach and being bold enough to even start teaching clinicians about psychedelics so early on. And everyone has been really not only behind us, but incredibly helpful. Everyone who's been invested has actually been a resource in a lot of other ways. So we're really, really lucky to have that kind of support right now.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Great to hear. Well, one of the most popular questions for both of you is asking if you could offer advice on choosing a training program. The question says, programs are popping up everywhere, but rigorous and enduring learning experiences are rare and precious. So do you have some advice on what folks should look for when they're choosing which facilitator program to work with?
I can chime in.
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind first off is just the wide range of specializations. So as Elizabeth mentioned, there are some programs that are really, really focused on mental health practitioners and therapists. There are others that are focused on more community-based facilitators who have a different scope of practice. So finding a program that is suited for your skill set coming in, I think, is a part of it. And also, so much of this work is relational, and one of the common things people talk about is, who are the trainers? Do they have a diverse set of trainers from a diverse set of backgrounds and expertise? And then also, I think just the layout of time and how the programming is going to fit into your life. I think it's a question of compatibility. So it's not so unlike dating, where you just kind of need to feel out for the right fit.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree, and I think it's a blessing that there will be a variety of programs, because there's not going to be one size fits all. And thinking about which program is really the best fit for each individual's needs, and that may take some time to go through that. But we really want to always encourage people to choose something that's going to be it's going to meet their needs and be a fit for them.
Sure. Rebecca, there was a specific question for you. How will you train all who want to learn while keeping class sizes small and intimate?
Could you repeat the first part? How many, what was that?
How will you train all of those? I mean, you mentioned that there's already a big list, which, so glad to hear about. But I think folks are suggesting, it might be nice to have some smaller, intimate settings, and if you have some sort of framework for being able to accommodate all the people who want to learn from you and from Alma Institute, but keeping those class sizes small.
Yeah, absolutely. This is so important and something that we've been talking about from the beginning. One sort of metric for that is your total cohort size, but I think another important thing to be thinking about is your ratio of not only instructors and lead educators, but of mentors to students. So you'll have those who are conveying the curriculum who will be available to students to a degree, but then really so much of the deep inner work, reflecting, metabolizing of the material is going to be happening in smaller groups. So it may be that whether you have a cohort of 25 or a cohort of 75, if each student has a small group of 5 of their peers and a mentor who they're actively involved with, we're hoping that that can really create a culture where you can go deep and then create a sort of sense of belonging within the larger cohort. So that's the way we're thinking about it. The other piece too is we've been really, really striving to not create a culture of urgency, and I know it's tough. We're in a 2-year development period. We were given an amount of time and a lot to do within that time. And I know that folks are really feeling eager to get into a program and become a facilitator, and I think it's really, really gonna benefit to be patient. And so we're doing everything we can to accommodate as many students as possible, while understanding that there are going to be things that we learn in the first couple of cohorts that's going to help us iterate and continue to improve. And so, if folks are willing and able to wait, I would say, give it some time. Let's see how the programs all sort of shake out. I think that's true with the service sites and with the growers. We're going to have to be patient in 2023, and there's a lot of lessons in the wait as well as the doing.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, I think you mentioned that Fluence has a psychotherapy program, or your training programs involve people with advanced degrees. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So across the board, our focus has always been on working with mental health care providers and therapists. We have a lot of classes that are open to anybody who is interested in the topic area and would like to join. But the programs that are really teaching about practice and clinical practice in general at Fluence are limited. Many are limited to people that have a scope of practice within which they can use those techniques. And so this Measure 109 opens up a new practice, a new license, and we'll be teaching, in a way that's aligned with preparing people for that license. At the same time, our expertise is really in working with people who come from a mental health care sensibility and background, have some training in psychotherapy, and I think that there are some specifics there in terms of what people with that background, ways that they may kind of conceptualize things or think, maybe things they may be in need of a little unlearning around, as well as in need of a little learning around that could be just different from people that don't have that background, if you've really been immersed in that world for a long time, as well as some skills that have been developed that I really believe can be retooled and applied or adapted to doing this work. And so we're already doing that in a lot of the training programs that we have for research studies, where people have usually an advanced degree and a license, and then they're learning, say, psilocybin therapy or another psychedelic-assisted therapy for the research setting. We have some experience working with that population, and that's sort of why this will be specific to that. The initial program, at least, will be specific to that group.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. We appreciate you offering these training programs and appreciate your time here today with us.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our third section here, which is going to be about service centers.
Thank you.
Our next two speakers are here today from Subtle Winds. Kate Gillespie is co-founder and clinical director of Subtle Winds Training and Transformative Therapy Center. She is a psychotherapist, clinical supervisor, and a training facilitator. Kate's focus is in supporting women, gender-diverse humans, and those identifying within the LGBTQ+ community. With 2 decades of experience in the mental health field, Kate has gained knowledge of a diverse array of therapeutic settings and modalities, including wilderness therapy, state psychiatric hospital, emergency department, mobile crisis response, and psychedelic harm reduction at festivals and events. Through traditional and non-traditional practice models, Kate has developed her own unique way of meeting people where they are at. She has a mission to inspire people to make lasting changes in their lives and open their minds to new possibilities and healthier ways of being. With her will be Benjamin Brubaker. Ben has worked in the mental health field for over 2 decades, having held positions such as crisis worker, mobile crisis worker, Hurricane Katrina Relief Operational Site Coordinator, day counselor for youth, AmeriCorps team leader, and direct care provider. Ben has dedicated his life to serving individuals from historically marginalized communities. He worked at Whitebird Clinic in Eugene for 15 years, starting as a crisis worker on their 24/7 crisis line and walk-in center. Later, he joined the mobile crisis intervention team as a crisis worker, began doing psychedelic harm reduction at festivals with Whitebird's rock medicine program, and providing de-escalation trainings across the state. Most recently, he served as the co-executive director of Whitebird Clinic before stepping back to build Subtle Winds Training and Service Center to apply his skill set to psilocybin facilitation. Please welcome Kate and Ben.
I will just briefly say, yeah, we are up here today to represent Subtle Winds, and thank you. And Subtle Winds is an organization of folks coming out of Lane County, Eugene, Oregon. A lot of us interconnected through the festival medicine work that we've done with the rock medicine program that Kate will talk about here in a little bit. I will just say briefly that when I came to Oregon over 15 years ago and found myself out at Country Fair volunteering with Whitebird Clinic and the rock medicine program there, I at that time didn't know that festival medicine and psychedelic harm reduction was a thing you could do when you grew up. And the amazing depth of experience and knowledge and compassion was something that I was really inspired by and has definitely partly led to some of our desire to do the work with creating a service center and a training program here in Oregon.
And hi, I'm Kate Gillespie. It's an honor to be here today. Like Ben and many others, I never thought that this would be part of my professional life. And I came to Whitebird Clinic after I finished my master's degree and just started out providing support for folks that were having hard times, and later became a coordinator for the rock medicine crew. And in that, I got to work with folks who were having hard times at festivals. These were people who had taken medicine for lots of different reasons, and oftentimes weren't seeking a cathartic experience, but they got one anyways. As one of my mentors said, you bought the ticket, you take the ride. So rock medicine started over 50 years ago, kind of in conjunction with the grassroots organization, the Oregon Country Fair. And that was just a group of hippies deciding that they wanted to throw this event, and Whitebird showed up with a box of Band-Aids. They created a holistic model, our founders of this program, and in that holistic model, they decided that to see somebody truly where they were at, you had to look at them holistically in both the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. So they would pair medical professionals like EMT medics or nurses or doctors with a crisis worker or mental health worker. And those people would work collaboratively together, not saying like your role's more important than mine, but together as a team, we can treat people as human beings with respect, regardless of their behavior. And so through this model, you know, starting Oregon Country Fair, working festivals all across Oregon, dead shows, and then more recently, EDM festivals. In fact, the last time I was in this building, I was working a New Year's celebration where there was definitely a lot of altered folks in attendance. Yeah, I had a very messy situation I had to manage with a couple of my nurse friends in a bathroom with a young woman who had become sick. And today I found a shower in the building and I was like, why didn't I know that was there? Really disappointing. Anyhow, working from this humanistic model, providing professional care with really clever interventions.
Mm-hmm. And kind of building off of then this experience that both of us got to have in all of this kind of years of knowledge, we decided that we really wanted to try to develop a program that kind of embraced a lot of these different things. A grounded practice, one that's really rooted in diverse healing approaches, one that's open to learning about other, you know, kinds of healing approaches as new people come in, one that really does have that client-centered nature, that human-centered part of it, and really prioritizes building community both internally and externally. We really believe that integration work that's really going to help folks to make the medicine stick and to really bring home those lessons is going to come from those kinds of community building work that the individual service centers, the training programs, others can also do. And so that's part of our goals, bringing together a collaborative group of diverse folks, connecting with contemporary practitioners, traditional healers, healthcare professionals, establishing a network of service centers, harm reduction groups, and traditional practitioners in plant medicine across the globe. And then co-creating really a collaborative ecosystem where we can support each other all the way across. And I think that you've heard that messaging over and over again today, and it made us really happy that it does seem like these ideals are being infused into the entire ecosystem. You know, some of our concerns are that local grassroots groups are being confronted with really expensive bureaucratic hurdles and costs, and I think we heard about a lot of those today. And we know that all of us are going to face challenges and need to maybe face some of those challenges together. We also know that investors into this new, I heard it called the psychedelic hype bubble, may be lured by kind of slick advertising or kind of stuck in that corporate medical model kind of mentality. And it's going to be up to all of us to build something different and to help convince investors to invest in something that could be different to really support our community around us. And finally, just, you know, I think that there's a real risk of the loss of that spiritual individual growth and the meaning that the medicine really seems to have given many in this room and seems to be offering people for tens of thousands of years, if we don't find ways to do this ecosystem differently.
And so some of the things that we're excited about was finding out that people can do microdosing as part of 109. Also just collaborating with this fantastic group of folks, and then also just bringing something new to our mental health community that's like out there and open and available. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kate and Benjamin. We'll have two other speakers coming up here with you, and then we can get to some questions and answer. Our next speaker today is MYLES KATZ. He's co-founder and director of business development at the Synthesis Institute. MYLES has spent his career across 3 different continents, helping to launch and lead 5 VC-funded startups with technological, socially responsible, and or green focuses. During this time, he's developed a specialty in early-stage strategy and capital raising for pioneering business models. As co-founder and director of business development at Synthesis, MYLES has been instrumental in developing infrastructure and financing for one of the world's first legal psychedelic experience service models. Welcome, MYLES.
Hey everyone, awesome to be here today. As shared, my name is Myles, and I'm one of the co-founding team members of the Synthesis Institute, which humbly started in 2018 as a legal psilocybin retreat in the Netherlands, and has since evolved to include psychedelic facilitator training. But given the nature of today's presentation, I'll kind of put our training arm in a box for now. And I will just jump right in. I thought I'd start with some visualization of what our retreats look like in the Netherlands as a foundation for what might it look like in Oregon. This is a venue in the Netherlands where we've run most of our retreats to date. It's a modern kind of wellness center built in the shell of an old church. As you can tell, it's very nicely, comfortably decorated, modern, spacious. It has spa elements, and it's part of how we like to incorporate different modalities into a full transformational retreat that psilocybin can be a part of. And there's two primary ways we work with clients in these retreats. There's these kind of sitting circles. This is all the container building, helping clients feel safe and vulnerable with our facilitators, with one another. We provide a lot of education, and we also, of course, provide the preparation and integration parts of the retreat around the ceremony. This is a staged photo of what one of our retreats might look like, and maybe you can get a sense of how it draws from what you might find in a clinical research setting, in addition to some of the elements of kind of the wisdom tradition use of psychedelics in a circle in a group setting. Since we started in 2018, we've done health and safety screening for over 4,000 applicants to come on our retreats. Learned a lot in the process about how to safely onboard people and how to decline them in a trauma-informed way. From that, we've hosted about 1,000 people on retreats, and these retreats have primarily been in groups of about 15 to 20 at a time. Those participants get a chance to participate in clinical research, and it's a real big value of ours to contribute back to the scientific community with our large participant base. And since launching our psychedelic training program for facilitators, we've graduated and/or enrolled about 180 students. A little bit more about the company, what we stand for. Since founding, we've always said that we stand for safe, legal, and professional access to psychedelic experiences and education. Our name, Synthesis, is a nod to our attempt to weave together the best practices from modern science and research, along with the best practices from ancient wisdom traditions. We believe that education is the foundation of how you can help someone have a positive experience, and also the basis for the journey that your life will go on once you start to integrate psychedelics into your life. And we really prioritize the experience in the container over the molecule or the dose, and like to think that the model we're developing could be modified and applied as other psychedelics become legal elsewhere. And last but not least, we really believe in leading by example, meaning that how we do something is just as important as what we do, and it's the main reason that we made the transition last year to be a steward-owned company and change our governance structure so that profit is ultimately reinvested back into the mission. And I don't have time to talk about that, but I'm really glad Bennett and Derek gave us a little bit of a nod earlier for what was a very challenging effort to pull that off. So a little bit about why we came to Oregon. There's really a huge philosophical alignment with what Oregon is implementing and how we approach our services in the Netherlands. I'd say most specifically, the distinction that Oregon is not going to be confined to the diagnosis and treatment model of administering psychedelics. And that's really where we start to see the possibility for a whole new paradigm of producing well-being as opposed to treating illness. We really see the potential of the first state to influence other states. Excited to see Colorado picking that up, and hopefully for first movers willing to dig in the ground and set up these businesses, there might be some benefit to being a part of the ecosystem as it develops. And really, everything happening in Oregon is really aligned with our pre-existing business model, including the fact that over half our clients that come to us in the Netherlands were coming from the United States. So there's a lot of reason to believe that there will be interest here. So I came to Oregon in middle 2020, back when it was IP34, and as soon as it was successful in the November election, we saw on an extensive property search across the state. we're incredibly grateful to have found a really one-of-a-kind property. Buckhorn Springs has an 8-bedroom lodge with a large commercial kitchen and 11 cabins. Easily can cater to large groups for retreats. There's lots of natural elements like seasonal streams and forests and trails. As you can see from this aerial photo, we're surrounded by thousands of acres of federally and state protected forests, even though we're just 20 minutes away from the closest town and airport. And last but not least, it came with what we believe will be a really beautiful ceremony space for administering psilocybin to groups next year. So despite the fact that we have this one-of-a-kind beautiful venue, we are far from being on the cusp of great success. We have a lot of roadblocks that have come up. Our county, Jackson County, even though in 2020 voted in favor of Measure 109, the commissioners have decided to put it an opt-out on the ballot. So we now find ourselves in campaign organizing, fundraising, things that we were not planning to do and obviously require a great deal of expertise and attention. Simultaneously, but separate to that process, is the county's process to develop time, place, and manner regulations. So there is a real possibility that the county opt-out vote could be unsuccessful, but the way that the county develops regulation around zoning could mean that our site cannot be used. And that's all happening in the next 60 to 75 days and doesn't even start to answer the questions of how will we do banking, payment processing, insurance, or how the OHA's final rules will impact how we can run our services. So a lot of open questions there. So I'm going to try to end on a note of a little optimism. What's great is that the finish line is in sight. I think I can speak for a lot of aspiring licensees. I say that it feels like the last 20% of the timeline of implementation is when 80% of the work is having to get done. And as many people have said, the world is watching, which we would turn around in a positive light and say, there's a lot of people in the world that want to see this succeed. And last but not least, what's really at stake is not any single business or county or state measure, but the possibility to really change the paradigm, as so many presenters have noted on today. So yeah, with that, I will end. And thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Healed people heal people. Wise words. Our last panel speaker is Cristiane Farentinos. Chris is from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where she earned her medical degree at Rio de Janeiro State University, completed her psychiatry residency at Rio de Janeiro Federal University, and practiced psychiatry before moving to Portland. In Portland, Chris pursued a career in substance abuse and mental health counseling, healthcare administration, training, and research, and held positions as director and COO for local community-based addictions and mental health clinics, as well as vice president for a local psychiatric hospital. While being a leader, Chris's passion for people's personal healing and growth has been the constant. Chris is currently the CEO for Pacific Premier Group PC and Pacific Premier Group Coaching and Consulting. Welcome, Chris.
Miles, Miles, Miles. We almost put on earnest money on a property, and we pulled out. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conference. I am so honored to be here today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Pacific Premier Group. We've been in business since 2014. I joined the business 2 years ago. And I am a healthcare organization administrator in recovery. And in that regard, I can tell you a little bit about my personal journey. How do I forward is it this one? Just the green thing? Okay, good, thank you. What's this thing? Nope. There you go. No? Okay, I'm having trouble.
No.
All right. Can we Show it to me.
I was just pressing this one.
Yeah, me too. I'm doing that.
Maybe try pointing it at the
monitor.
At the monitor, yeah.
At here? Okay. There you go. So Pacific Premier Group is a team of clinicians, coaches, and consultants that focus upon solving complex problems from a trauma-centered perspective. We are definitely steeped into medicine and therapy and with licensed professionals, as well as coaching and consulting all over the United States, Europe, and South America. It's a mighty small team of people that does a lot. Oops, oh gosh. All right, how am I not getting this right? Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit of my story. I, as what Corinne was saying, started as a psychiatrist and moved to United States and had a pretty amazing career in healthcare administration, research, teaching. But I was very much part of what we heard today as the medical industrial complex, if you will, in very large organizations and hospitals. And with that, I think I was killing my soul, my alma, and got pretty burned out. And in fact, I think I had a syndrome that was almost like I had a broken heart syndrome of seeing what was being done to something that I was so invested in. In that connection, I started looking for some grief work, some way of healing from that. And the use of psychedelic-assisted therapy was one of the ways in which really I was able to get to the other side, decide to move into a different direction, go back to doing some individual work, and also joining Pacific Premier Group, which really changed the direction of my life. Meanwhile, I also lost the husband of my soulmate, also grieving a lot, and part of the healing also included my experience with psychedelic-assisted therapy. So that's to say how important that was for me personally, but also Pacific Premier Group was founded by Paul Conti, a physician that he has his own trajectory. He wrote a book about trauma, the invisible epidemic, and his own journey in his healing from traumas that he went through. And I think PPG has been in service since 2014, but I think joining our forces now really is pointing towards us integrating psychedelic-assisted treatment in what we already do. I think what's important to say about PPG is that we already do medical and therapy services, coaching, consulting, as I said, and we do these very special intensive programs in which we cater the program to one individual at a time. I mean, it's, as you can imagine, this is an expensive proposition with 5 to 6 clinicians that bring different modalities to the table and work very intensely with a person. So it's kind of a form of a retreat, but with several different modalities of therapy. And in this year, 2022, we included ketamine in the modalities that we're bringing forth, and we intend to also incorporate psilocybin-assisted therapy in what we do in these retreats, in these intensive programs. By the way, funding, we are a for-profit organization, and we do not accept insurance. We have decided that actually doing medicine in the way that we wanted to do included the fact that we were not going to be constrained by insurance. And so our ability to actually cater the programs and cater the kinds of therapies that we're able to provide are exactly because we play outside of the insurance rules. I think these intensive programs have already demonstrated in our experience as being incredibly transformational. And the addition, the layering of the ability to use also ketamine and eventually psilocybin really take that to the next level of deconstructing and reconstructing and healing that is possible. What I believe it's most important for us going forward is getting more and more rule clarity and understanding how all these licensed physicians and clinicians will be able to integrate psilocybin in this model that it's less steeped into the medical model, which is totally great and fine. It's just that we're going to have to figure out how to do it. It's not self-evident at this moment. And I long for us to create community learning together and being able to share with each other through this initial next year and how we are able to navigate all of the intricacies of the new rules and try to help shape it as well. So thank you very much for your attention. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to all of our speakers on this panel. When we talk about service centers, I think that there are a number of models available. And I think we saw from some of the pictures that Myles shared, one model could be sort of out in nature with an overnight accommodation type of add-on. I'm just curious about, for all of you though, what is the specific model that you have for each of your service centers in mind? And how do you think people who participate in this program are going to want to have available to them?
Do you guys want to go first?
I mean, I would just say briefly, one of my folks coined the term a curated experience. And we really think that that's going to have to be a part of it. I think that the music blindfold approach may work for some individuals, but there may be some folks that need to have more of an interactive approach. And inside a room may sound kind of terrifying to some individuals, but other folks I know actually feel more comfortable in those kinds of enclosed spaces than they do out in nature. And so I think we're going to have to be a little flexible about our approaches. I'm hoping that's where some of the collaboration can happen too. Sharing our spaces so that we can co-locate some of the how we use the service centers and refer people to each other, and also have the clinicians use those different spaces.
Yeah, we're located in a very beautiful area that's very urban, right in front of the river at Macadam Avenue. And it's a commercial property. We're starting to think about actually doing it in that space, because our first initial vision was a retreat center very much like what you showed, and we literally had made an offer in a property out in Hillsborough, and we had to pull out.
Yeah, I can share. Synthesis has developed this, what I would overly simplify as a multi-day immersive retreat model to work above ground with psilocybin. There's a few reasons for that. I'd say the two that come to mind immediately are the idea that the potential for someone to transform when they are far removed from the everyday experience that helps create stress and tension and unwellness. And then specifically in the group model, there's a study that we participated with the Imperial College of London, and there's a term called communitas, which refers to the feeling of community, and this measured with our participants how their sense of being a part of a group and being supported that way contributed to a better outcome in well-being after the retreat. And so, I'll just say that I always try to declare that, like, we don't think we're the best model or the only model. There's going to be so many ways that there already is today in the world. Like, almost nobody in this room has ever had a legal psychedelic experience, and so I think that's just a testament to how wide-ranging all the ways to use psychedelics are. And we've gone with this model for the reasons we have, and we're still at the infancy of this whole industry, so how things will evolve, anyone can take an educated guess, but that's where we started today.
Thanks. One question that quite a few audience members have is about microdosing and whether or not your service centers will involve microdosing or allow participants to take part in microdosing, and how will that work at your service center?
That's something we've talked about briefly, but kind of building off the last question is having cohorts of folks that have similar healing to do is something that I envision. And so doing group work where you could have people come in and receive a microdose and then sit in a group with a facilitator and people who have shared experiences. One of my areas that I would like to focus on is healing healthcare providers, and so like having healthcare providers that deal in end of life routinely, working together and going through a therapeutic process together, so building that microdose piece into the work.
Yeah, kind of the Carl Rogers encounter group maybe approach is kind of how we could see that kind of flowing. And then, I had some the other day suggest a coffee shop model where you would be able to come in and take your microdose and stay for as long as you kind of needed to stay and work on your laptop and do your work and do the things that you need to catch up on, and creating space for that or other healing modalities.
For our model of retreats, I'd say ultimately the dose that a participant gets is a two-way conversation with the facilitator and the participant. That being said, we don't explicitly plan to be a microdosing center, but there are lots of scenarios where someone will come on retreat and in a first or second ceremony on a 5-day retreat, for example, might decide to do a microdose or not do a dose at all. And so, I think I like how the OHA has developed rules that it can accommodate that wide range of spectrum, but microdosing won't be something we explicitly attempt to cultivate.
Yeah, and in our center, we're much smaller, and we definitely don't plan to be a microdosing facility. We work already, many of our patients decide to do microdosing on their own, and we monitor and we work with them in terms of what kind of medications they're on and what they shouldn't be on, and we just kind of help along the way, but not as a center that will provide that.
Got it. Well, another question that has been upvoted several times here is specifically from Myles. I think, Myles, you just casually mentioned a little bit about, not really having negative experiences of participants, but people were curious whether any of your retreat participants have ever had negative reactions during retreat sessions, like significant enough that intervention is needed, and if so, whether that's common.
Yeah, so over the years that we've been doing retreats in the Netherlands, there's definitely, ultimately there's no way to predict the experience that someone's going to have. And we've developed quite a diverse, I'd say, operational strategy to the facilitator team on site to support people having a wide range of experiences. I'm being careful with my words because I don't want to project anything unintentionally, but there are definitely scenarios where individuals need specialized support, need to be taken outside of a group room, need to be given a particular type of care. And so, if I was asked to quantify that, definitely not anything that happens in a meaningful way. I like to think that all the time and attention and energy that we put into setting up the container and making people feel safe and comfortable reduces the chances that that's going to happen. But I think it would be dishonest to say that you can every time prevent a challenging experience from happening. And I think the best we can do as a service center and as a group of facilitators is really do our best to minimize any potential harm that comes when difficult experiences arise. And so that's an ongoing process. And we've been doing it our own way for a number of years. Really look forward to learning with a group of practitioners in Oregon on how best to handle that.
Thanks for sharing that, Miles.
Yeah.
We are almost out of time, but this is an important question. So in, 5 words or less, what's the biggest obstacle that you face in setting up your service center? What help do you need the most? Is it investment, business expertise, certain employee types?
We're just in the beginning of this journey. I think I actually shared that with you just in there, that it will be very interesting to understand the scope of practice of our licensed clinicians, and how do you separate that out when a licensed clinician is actually doing an administration session? How do you separate out the scope of practice? So we don't know the answer yet.
Sure.
I would say the biggest obstacle we face today is local government. And I would say the support that we need is political fundraising, strategy, execution, and if anyone can provide that in the next 60 days, that would be awesome.
I would say investment, but investment is partly really required because of all the things that we're expressing here.
Sure.
Legal clarity, rules clarity, those things are all going to also cost money to really get to. And so those pieces, I think, are what I would say.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback on that and say we have a great crew of folks that are really putting a lot of time and energy into building subtle wins on a voluntary basis, but to be able to move forward financially, we need investment.
Thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. Appreciate all the insight and you guys sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.